What's going on, Sunbelt fans? Welcome into the Week 8 preview for Sunbelt football. We've got two weekday matchups starting tonight. If you're listening to this on Wednesday, October 19th, that is. This is Georgia State traveling up to Boone to face App State. We'll see what happens with this one. Georgia State has never won in this matchup. They're 0-8 all time. So let's see. I guess the best way to put this is Georgia State's coming up the mountain in an outdoor venue that does not play well into their hands. For those that don't know, from a long time ago, there was a famous set of plays where Georgia State was down already going into the half, kept calling timeouts, and it was like a snowy game. There was snow flurries throughout. And by the time they got done calling all these timeouts, I guess App State had enough, and they faked the field goal and went for a touchdown and kind of ran up the score even more. This is kind of that type of game where that cold, miserable weather, because it is going to be cold by the time this game is done, it will be in the 20s. It's that game that if you don't set in early, it's going to be tough to get into later. And that seemed to have played in App's favor for a long period of time. That over the years has kind of dwindled. I mean, if you think about the recruiting and where these players are coming from, they're not coming from this type of environment, this type of weather they're not used to seeing often. So to me, honestly, it doesn't favor App as much as it used to. But I do still think that it's been a little chilly starting off the last probably 2 weeks there in Boone at this point. So I do think it does still favor App. You have to think also that they can't afford another loss if they have any hopes of a conference championship or an East Division title. Those things can't happen. They can't allow those losses to happen anymore. I mean, Georgia State's kind of thinking along the same lines and obviously wants to get a win in this rivalry. Well, I wouldn't call it a rivalry, but they want to get a win in this series. Just as much as App wants to stay in the conference title race. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. If you look at the spread, I think it's currently, 9.5 points. This game is on ESPN2 at 7:30 Wednesday, by the way. So it is a national audience. There is no other college football game. There's obviously no NFL on a Wednesday. So this should have a lot of eyes on it. Hopefully it lives up to expectation. I'm calling this one in favor of App State 27-17, which means they will cover that spread. But it wouldn't shock me if it's a little closer because of the weather. It could be a really even factor that plays out in the end because this App State team has not been running the ball as successfully as they have been in years past, so they were going to have to go to the air more often. And if they're doing that with cold weather, obviously that might be something that could be a struggle. Moving on to the next matchup, Thursday night, ESPNU at 7:30 pits Troy going down to Mobile to face South Alabama in the battle for the belt. The Trojans have had the last 4 wins in this rivalry. These two teams do not like each other at all, so this should be a great matchup. If you look at the records, you've got 5-2 for Troy versus 5-1 for South Alabama. This should be a much bigger game on the national radar as far as I'm concerned. You've got South Alabama, whose only loss came to a very good UCLA team, so they're close to being 6-0. And you've got Troy with 2 losses, one to a very good Ole Miss team who's also undefeated, and also the last-second Hail Mary loss at App State. So, I mean, both of these teams are very, very good this year, and both of these teams are battling within the same division for the first time in a long time. And so this one is going to have, a great game written all over it. There is obviously an NFL game that night, Thursday night, but there is only one other college football game that night, and it's Georgia Tech versus Virginia. There's no reason to watch that game. Obviously, you're listening to a Sunbelt podcast here. We're going to favor the Sunbelt no matter what, but I'd put this game up against any game anywhere across the country this week, honestly. With the intensity that these guys don't like each other or care for one another, this one's going to be really fun to watch. Plus the fact that they're both great football teams this year. And so it's really good and awesome to see that they're going up against very few eyes that are battling for the TV that night. So it's kind of good, kind of bad, because you would hope this could be a game that maybe flipped with the Georgia State-App State game as far as viewership and put it on a Wednesday where they're really the only thing to watch. But Thursday night is great because it's still a night people expect to see football on TV, and they may be looking around to see what they could watch that night. So this one sets up in favor of South Alabama as far as the spread's concerned by 3 points. I don't think that could be way off. However, here's what I'm going to go with. I called Troy winning the West Division because they've battled through a tough East Division over the past several years, and I think they're kind of battle ready and gotten better through adversity over the past few years. They're putting it all together this year. You know, that unlucky loss at App, loss to a good quality Ole Miss team. USA is not bad. I mean, there's no reason to think this game can't come down to a last-second field goal or a last-second Hail Mary, even for that matter. I've got this one not within 3 points. I've got it within 2. I'm favoring Troy in this one 23-21. I wouldn't be shocked no matter which way it goes. I also wouldn't be shocked if it's somehow closer than that, if it's a 1-point victory somehow. But this one is one I highly recommend. I'm calling it the game of the week. I'm not calling it really an upset. I think these teams are so even right now before they play that it'll be hard to say that one's really a big upset over the other. Obviously, with the spread, you can call it an upset. But as far as like a real clear-cut thing, no, I'm not calling it like an upset special type of thing. But I think that one's one everyone needs to keep their eyes on going into the weekend. Next up, we'll go with the Saturday matchups. The first one of the day is a 12 noon kickoff on CBS Sports Network that pits ULM going up to West Point to face Army. This one's interesting to me. They're favoring Army in this matchup by 6.5 points. I have no idea why. If you look at Army's record, their 2 wins, they're 2-4 overall. Their 2 wins are only against FCS opponents. That's not to say they haven't had a couple close games. They played Coastal pretty close at the beginning of the year, and I think they had one other close game. Can't remember who it was with right off the top of my head. But Georgia State took care of them pretty easily in the end. I just don't see why Army's being favored in this matchup at all. I mean, you look at ULM's record, and yeah, it's 2-5, but like I said before, the eye test for ULM, they are so much better than what their record shows this year. Their offense is ready to explode, and I don't think Army's a good quality team or opponent this year, honestly. So I don't know why Army's favored here. I'm shocked by the spread. I mean, even if you're going to favor Army because they're the home team, I don't know why you're giving them 6.5 points. I'm going totally against that. Now, I'm not saying it won't be a close game. I do think that West Point, with the weather being colder up there, plays into their favor to an extent. I don't think it plays in their favor for a victory. I'm favoring ULM in this one, 34-33. Yeah, I'm calling it a 1-point game, a close game, just because I have no idea what that home field advantage kind of is like there for Army. They're not known for packing the stands. They're not going to pack the stands for this ULM team because it's just not a team that is known very well up there in that area of the country. And unfortunately, it's just not going to bring a lot of excitement to the matchup. But regardless, I think ULM takes care of business and keeps us in the win column for the out-of-conference slate because they're the only out-of-conference game this weekend. Next up, we got a 3:30 kick on ESPN Plus that pits Marshall going to Harrisonburg to face James Madison. James Madison, obviously 5-1, coming off that defeat to Georgia Southern just last week. They are the heavy favorite, being favored currently at 12.5 points. I don't know how they respond to this, but I think they respond favorably. The Marshall team has just been struggling for a number of reasons, and a lot of that stuff's kind of in the background, so some of us don't know all the things that are going on. I don't know if they get over the hump against a quality James Madison team who's going to be looking to rectify all the mistakes that they had last week. And even with all those mistakes, obviously James Madison still scored 38 points against a pretty good Georgia Southern secondary. So I got to favor James Madison here. Before the season started, I called this game in favor of Marshall, but they've struggled. James Madison, if you look at the statistics, they've allowed 3 rushing touchdowns through the entire season. 3. There's teams in this conference who have allowed 3 in numerous games. So I as good as Marshall's rushing offense has been as far as overall yardage for Labrum, I just don't know if they're going to be strong enough to get it done against a quality opponent there in James Madison. So I'm favoring James Madison in this one, 34-18. After that one, we've got another 3:30 kick on ESPN Plus as well. That pits Georgia Southern going to Old Dominion. I think this one could also be right there as game of the week. Obviously, Troy, South Alabama has so much more at stake at this point. So I'm favoring that one for number one. But this is a very close second for me, especially with what Georgia Southern just did last week, as well as what Old Dominion did last week. I mean, these two teams are coming in really hot, scoring a lot of points on the board, and I think this one's going to be exciting. There could be fireworks all over the place with how many touchdowns are scored in this one. But you also got to think, is it possible to keep those types of offenses going as well as they have? So I am calling this one close. By the way, the spread favors ODU by 2.5 points. Maybe that's the home field advantage playing into it. Or if they're looking at maybe how many points ODU put up against Coastal last week. I think Coastal was just ready to lose one, really, if you want me to be honest with you. I think they were getting by in some games where they actually struggled, but they were just good enough talent-wise to overcome it. I think ODU finally, they ran into a buzzsaw there. ODU was ready to prove to everyone that they came into this conference to win right away, and they took care of business. But look, the Georgia Southern team has faced a little bit more adversity this year to me as far as getting into shootouts, and they're more well prepared for this type of thing. ODU hasn't put that many points on the board like they did last week with 49. They haven't done that too many other times. I think the Georgia Southern team could put points on the board all the time. So it's just whether Georgia Southern's defense can stop that ODU offense enough to win this game. I do think they do that. I am favoring Southern in this one 31-28, so I think it's going to be a really close game. Again, another one that if you've got the time around 3:30 to click into ESPN Plus, watch that one. Highly recommend. Another game, 5 o'clock start, ESPN Plus, pits Arkansas State going up against Louisiana down there in Lafayette. And this one is favoring the Ragin' Cajuns by 6.5 points. I don't think that's too far off of where this game should be. Obviously, we think that UL has maybe turned a corner here, but with early season struggles, maybe kind of getting out of their way. Maybe they're coming into their own. Arkansas State's been performing about where we thought they would overall. They have played some tough games, and they've been better than what some would predict in certain games. Probably not as good in other ones, so it's hard to say exactly where they're at. But I think this one's still a close game. It's one of those games that historically has been pretty good overall because Arkansas State used to be, the top dog in this conference from a couple years ago, and they've kind of fallen off, but they've got some recruits, they've got some talent in some places, they can make some plays, but I just don't know if it's going to be enough. I think UL's kind of getting back on that right track. They've got that quarterback position kind of getting sorted out a little bit better there. I'm going to favor UL in this one, 27-24. And the last matchup of the night is actually a kickoff at the same time. Again, 5 o'clock, another ESPN Plus game. It's going to pit Southern Miss going up against Texas State. Again, Texas State, kind of that same type of team as maybe the realm of ULM and Arkansas State. It's kind of like, could they outperform? Could they win? Certainly. Will they? I don't know. I don't have enough that I've seen in them to be really positive about that. And this Southern Miss team hasn't been blowing me away either, but at times they have looked really good quality-wise. That defense, as I've said before, they bring the hit stick, man. They make people want to not catch the ball the next play, not maybe run the ball the next play. So I think that type of defense going up against Texas State, who struggled to run the ball quite a bit this season, I think that favors Southern Miss in this one. They're favored by the 2.5 points. I think they cover that, but barely, because I think Texas State has started to figure a couple things out. I just don't know if they figured out enough to continue into that win column. Obviously, last week they went down to Troy, but again, that's a 3-point game, and before I think a lot of people would have called that one a lot further off. So I still think it's a close game, but I am favoring Southern Miss in this one, 24-21. That wraps up the Week 8 preview. I hope all these games come down to the wire and make it a really fun week to watch some more Sunbelt football. Thanks for listening, and we will all try and stay a little bit warmer this week. Until next week, see you later.